Greetings! If you're new to this channel, hi! I'm Geeky. I like to write and draw animatics in my free time and upload them here, but we're doing something different because Disney's newest Blender has ruined my life. I know everyone's had pretty bad reactions to Wish ever since it dropped in November 2023, but I'm surprised that it's gotten me like this for so long. I think it's just because there's so many layers to how bad it is. That and I'm going to school for animation. I'm graduating and getting a BFA in animation in less than a year, so you can imagine why I'm so upset about this movie's midness. So upset that I started writing a video essay about how I'd rewrite the movie to try and make it better. That was supposed to be a small side project. It did not end up being a small side project. Let me illustrate for you why. Oh man, this part of the script, I'm not sure if trying to articulate this idea in words would suffice. I'll just make an animatic out of it instead to get the idea across. Wow, there's a lot of these now. I better make my own designs for some of the characters so I can be sure to keep things consistent. It's gonna be boring if all these animatic segments are quiet. I'll get some of my friends to help voice act in them. Oh gosh, I need to audition the other roles because I don't have enough available VA friends to do all the roles. Oh god, it's almost 2 hours long? And that's just my bits? I don't even have the voice acted lines all done yet? Someone wants to write a song for this thing? Yeah, suffice to say, this thing ended up way bigger than I thought it would. Now I'm splitting it into a two-parter, and who knows when it's gonna be finished? I sure don't. And this video's content was originally gonna be part of the part one of the video essay as like a quick tangent in the intro, but y'all know how Your Movie Sucks was doing that live-action Lion King video essay, and he had to make a whole other video essay about Kimba the White Lion because he was going to include a quick segment about it addressing that conspiracy that Disney stole the idea for Lion King from Osamu Tezuka, and then he found way more than he thought he would and proceeded to make a 2.5-hour video about why the conspiracy is unfounded? Yeah, that's what this is. I was gonna have a small segment in my video essay addressing the whole popular idea of Asha and Star being love interests, and how this supposedly was based on concept art, but I found so much more other stuff and it ended up running so long that not only did it bloat out the intro of the video essay, I feared it would come out as super tangent-y in what was already, quite literally, a tangent. So yeah, now we have a video of me exploring evidence for and against the fact that Asha and Star might have been love interests. God help us. So what started all this was the fact that I saw someone on Tumblr, not naming names, stating that they had bought the Art of Wish book, aka those fancy art books that show off all the storyboards and concept arts of all the locations and characters, basically all the visual development that went into the movie, and stated that they didn't find anything about Asha and Star being in love. And here's the thing. Yeah, I also have the Art of Wish book, Chuckle Nuts. Mostly because I wanted access to the concept art of the film without skimming through low-quality Google images while prepping for the original video essay. I've read this thing front to back in preparation for all of this and that. And according to my findings, yeah, this person is right. If you don't know, there's this big thing going around in the Wish rewrite spaces about how the star was not only originally going to be a shape-shifting star boy who talked, but also a love interest for Asha. But there's actually not anything in the art book that hints at a romance between the two. And there's a chance that the other big thing people point at when talking about this supposed scrapped romance wasn't about this scrapped romance either. To really get into this, I need to address two pieces of evidence people point to when they try to argue that Asha and Star were once going to be a couple. And while I'll address why they probably don't apply, while diving down this rabbit hole, I've found multiple other things that very well still point towards this anyways, so let's just go over them real quick. Evidence 1. They said it in the art book. There's a quote in the art book where one of the writers of Wish, Alison Moore, states that Asha and Star are soulmates, but this isn't in relation to the initial iteration of Star where he was a shapeshifting star boy, but actually the current iteration where he's a marketable plushie. To quote, "Once Star became a mime character, it was so brain-breaking and liberating. Now Star and Asha have an emotional journey. They are soulmates." End quote. I get it though, especially in a project fronted by Disney, soulmates is a very connotative word that they probably wouldn't throw around, let alone with any kind of nuance, but considering the context, I do believe it really is just a nuanced way of saying they were meant to meet and change each other's lives, not particularly romantically, but in other ways. Here's the thing though, while this quote from the art book doesn't entirely support the idea of Asha and Star being in love, there's other stuff that does. There's an animatic that surfaced, I believe it was available in some DVD bonus features for Wish, that was rewritten and removed from the film because Star was, quote-unquote, doing too much. They felt Asha needed to take more charge in the story. Which is really funny because in the final film, things just kind of happen to Asha. Like, you can argue that Star still does a lot of the heavy lifting. Remember this contradictory deflection here, because I'm going to bring this up again in a bit. In this scene, there's a moment where Star, Asha, and Valentino fall into the water while escaping the pursuit of Queen Amaya. And when they do, there is a segment where the Star gently takes Asha's hand, and they both look longingly into each other's eyes, before Star helps them all to the surface, and they take a leisurely swim through the oceans of Rosas. It's a beautiful scene, and I refuse to believe that this is platonic. The soulmates quote was one thing, but there is no other context here to disprove the fact that this little handhold and look into each other's eyes could very well still be romantic. When it comes to the animation pipeline, this animatic is what you call locked. You can tell because there's a dialogue recording instead of just captions, there's temp sound, and there's music.
Star, remember the thing I just told you not to do? I'm going to need you to do it. Now. Let go!
Don't let them get away!
This is essentially finished to the point that they were going to pass this along with the intention of it being the blueprint for the animation. Just like how most people who believe in the Starboy Asha romance don't believe a Disney writer would use the word soulmates with any kind of nuance, I refuse to believe that the storyboard artists who put this together and had it approved to the point that this animatic was locked with the intention of it being the blueprint for the final animation would do this without intending for it to be romantic. Evidence 2. At All Costs. At All Costs is one of the songs from the final film. It's sung by Asha and Magnifico as a little duet, and they're singing about his collection of wishes, and the original demo version of it surfaced around the time the movie was released in theaters. And there is one difference between the lyrics in the demo and the final song, which is that instead of saying, "And promise us one day," it says, considering a lot of people noticed that this song sounds super out of place in the final film's context, combined with this one line change, people started to theorize that this song was possibly originally meant for Asha and Starboy. I'll go more into why I think this is the case in the actual rewrite video essay once it comes out, but for now I need to address the piece of evidence people cite when it comes to disproving this very theory, which is that Julia Michaels, the movie's lyricist, said that the song was always intended to be about Asha and Magnifico. She just made it sound like a love song because she felt the movie should have one. I went to look for wherever she said this because the Tumblr poster didn't provide a source, and I found it. I'll just try not to go into much of a tangent about how yikes that title is if it's true. To quote, "How cool would it be if we wrote a song that if you listen to it on its own, it sounds like a love song? It could be something you could play at your wedding, or be a lullaby to your kids, just something really beautiful. But when you watch the film, it's the heroine and the villain. You realize they're coming about this both from various points, one from a very selfless standpoint, and one from a selfish standpoint." At this point, I probably would have called it quits and acknowledged that we were wrong. Star and Asha was never meant to be in love, and I just put a disclaimer saying that I'm going with this creative choice not because of concept art, but because I think it would service the rewrite I'm going for. I would have done that if this Julia Michaels interview/article hadn't helped me notice a pattern when it came to Wish. Specifically when it came to people explaining why they scrapped certain ideas or went with certain creative decisions. AKA, I'm having a hard time believing that Julia is telling the truth here. I'm going into a bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory-ish segment here in terms of what I think is going on behind the scenes, so please take everything I'm spitballing here about the inner workings of Wish with a grain of salt. This segment is gonna sound super tangent-y, because I'm talking about like 4 different things here in length, but trust me, it all connects. Because I found multiple examples of the people who worked on Wish, including the chief creative officer of Disney, like the whole company, not just this movie, saying things about this production that don't make sense. Some of these are opinion-based or vibes-based, I'll admit that, but some are facts. Some are irrefutable facts that they're getting wrong. But keep in mind, I'm going to school and graduating soon with a degree in animation, aka this exact stuff. I think if anyone has at least some qualification to say that these opinionated creative decisions don't make sense when taking everything they're talking about into account, it'd be me. And we'll get into this with the first example I found, a scene that was scrapped from the final film because, as Mark Kennedy, one of the people who worked on it, says,
"The scene was changed because we wanted Magnifico to be a more threatening villain."
If you don't want to go searching out this deleted scene, the premise is Magnifico hasn't found the star yet, but he's holding Asha's family and their wishes hostage. He's threatening to destroy and consume her family's wishes unless she hands over the star. Asha obliges, trying to pass off Valentino as the star, with the entire crowd of onlookers either falling for it or playing along, might I add, and it's pretty convincing all things considered. But Magnifico isn't fooled. He eats like 5 wishes, turns into a hulking monster to keep threatening everyone, even more, until he realizes that the star is up in his study trying to steal back everyone's wishes. They gave 2 reasons for scrapping the scene. One is that they wanted Magnifico to be more threatening by having him already capture the star in this big climactic final fight. And 2, they didn't want Asha to come off as stupid by trying to pass off her talking goat as the star. Which that second one is especially funny to me, because it's almost like you had a version of the star where trying to convince Magnifico that he disguised himself as a talking goat would be a viable plan. Also, God forbid Asha have any flaws whatsoever. She's 17. Not every plan she makes is gonna be a banger, especially when she is under threat of the king and doesn't want her family or her new star friend to get hurt, so she has to act fast. But I digress. The point is, I saw this explanation and noticed that they're saying this while disregarding, everything else happening in this scene. People dropping like flies when their wishes are consumed, meaning that Magnifico is potentially killing Asha's friends and family for the sake of power unless she fesses up and tells him where the star is. And again, Magnifico turns into a hulking monster that not only his guards are afraid of, but his own wife as well. Honestly, I would consider this perfectly threatening. Especially so when you compare it with the final movie, the quote-unquote more threatening version they went with. What does Magnifico do? Aside from capturing the star and harnessing its power, he covers the sky with clouds so that they can't see the stars anymore and wish on them. Then he traps everyone against the ground with magic, but it doesn't even seem to work half the time considering Amaya is able to get free of her restraints in this one bit. That could also just be an animation error, but in a Disney movie? In your 100-year milestone film? This isn't even taking into account how he's written for the rest of the film. Asha and her family escape him because she drops a cabinet on him. He's just out of the scene after that. I'm not even kidding. And you could argue, well, that's before the climax. Mark Kennedy said they wanted to make him more threatening during the climax. Well, he's not! You want to know how they defeat him? They sing at him really passionately, and then the star and the wishes are able to get free, and his dark magic just turns on him all of a sudden and traps him in his staff. It's just so boring and anticlimactic. Mr. Big Sorcerer Man with the power of a whole star doesn't even do anything to try and stop it, except shoot 2 blasts of magic before stopping that entirely, tying the people of Rosas closer to the ground to try and keep them from literally standing up to him. And then making an ominous green fog cloud that also doesn't do anything. For real, what was the point of the green cloud? You couldn't have done, fire or something? Like the movie that you were already trying to reference with that Briar Patch pattern? Don't think I didn't catch that. This movie has not been quiet about its Sleeping Beauty inspirations. More on that later. Also, Magnifico doesn't do anything to Asha. You could argue that her singing at him is just too much and he can't muster the strength to fight her. But even before that, when he has her at her most vulnerable, he's not doing anything. He just grabs her and throws her around the roof. I don't think I've ever watched any other movie where I was actively wondering why the villain wasn't trying to kill the protagonist. They took this Sorcerer King final fight and somehow made it boring, which is the worst offense you could do in a movie like this made for children. Throw her off the roof, for God's sake. You have the perfect opportunity. There's nothing keeping you from doing it. You're already fully evil and committed to ruling Rosas through fear. You don't need to keep up an appearance anymore. Just kill Asha! There's this and this other scene I found where it's revealed Magnifico's big evil plan in the old draft of the movie was to gain ultimate power by pulling a star out of the sky to harness its magic. This draft sets up this motivation from the start, by the way. There's no evil book to, make him realize, oh, hey, harnessing this star would be cool, actually. And the argument for ditching it? Higher-ups didn't understand why Magnifico would want ultimate power so bad. Disney, honey, sweetie, come here. Maybe he wants power just because. You've written like 20 other movies over your 100-year legacy where the villains are like that just because they are. Ursula wants the throne just because she wants it. Ignoring the Broadway version where they write her as Ariel's disgraced aunt who was banished from the kingdom, of course. Jafar wants power and the throne because he wants it. The evil queen wants to be the fairest in the land and is willing to kill a 13-year-old to do that just because she wants it. Maleficent feels slighted by not being invited to Aurora's christening, but even then, she's evil just because she wants to be. And Cruella de Vil wants to kill puppies so she can turn them into a coat. Why? Well, despite what some live-action remake might make you believe, it's because she wants to, because she is an awful person. Some people don't have a rhyme or reason to them being awful. Some people are just awful and want to be the ones on top just because they want to, especially in a movie written to pay tribute to fairy tales, where the villains aren't sympathetic most of the time and are just there to be symbolic, or just an obstacle to overcome, or be foils to the protagonist, like with Asha and Magnifico. Fairy tale logic aside, you're the studio that is to blame for the animated villain archetype who is evil for the sake of being evil, and this movie is an homage to your classics. Let him be evil just to be evil. Is that so hard? This isn't even touching on the fact that he wants to harness the star in the final film. They just changed it so a MacGuffin book makes him want to do it, which was my least favorite thing about his whole character. Having it be a cursed book that turns him evil when he opens it in desperation removes all the nuance and agency from Magnifico's character. Was it so hard to keep the setup at the start of the film that he wanted to harness the star to wield its magic and be a more powerful sorcerer king? It's not hard just to make him awful for the simple fact that he likes being awful and wants to be the one on top and in control. But yeah, I'm bringing that up because this is just a couple of examples out of the few I've found of creatives who worked on this movie ignoring what made these scenes really good and just making up excuses for why they had to be cut or rewritten. That's not all. Remember how I said they're not subtle at all about taking inspiration from Sleeping Beauty, and that we'd get back to that? Admittedly, this was brought to my attention by Animation Hustle, although I did look a little more into it just to be sure. The main issue that Animation Hustle brings up is the fact that the team behind Wish claims that, the art style is inspired by the watercolor backgrounds in Sleeping Beauty. They've said that, word for word, in multiple interviews when asked about the stylized 3D looking like watercolor paintings.
Artistry in our look, we've got a look like we've never seen before. Very inspired by the early watercolors, particularly of Sleeping Beauty.
She says it here.
A huge inspiration for this film was Sleeping Beauty. We really wanted to celebrate that watercolor style.
She says it here. She says it here. She says it here.
Sleeping Beauty's backgrounds weren't watercolor, they're gouache! I went to see if I could find something conclusive about what medium Eyvind Earle did use for the backgrounds on Sleeping Beauty, and I managed to find this auction listing for one of his concept pieces, which, would you look at that! But even then, I'm in art school. I have used paint before. Watercolor doesn't look like this, nor does it look like whatever Earle is painting with in this behind-the-scenes footage, because Eyvind Earle was a very famous painter, so of course they would record behind-the-scenes footage of him doing backgrounds for Sleeping Beauty. The only Disney movie I know of that had watercolor backgrounds was Lilo and Stitch, and ironically, it was because of budget cuts, which is very fitting considering my main complaint about the stylized 3D in Wish is that it ended up looking cheap. Okay, actually, I lied. I found out there were a couple of early Disney movies like Snow White that also had watercolor backgrounds, but that's not the point here. What's getting me is them specifically naming Sleeping Beauty as having watercolor backgrounds. I know Sleeping Beauty backgrounds were a big inspiration for the film because they also said this in the art book, but you know what they didn't specify in the art book? The medium that the Sleeping Beauty backgrounds were drawn in. The fact that they're specifying watercolor backgrounds in these interviews reads to me like those people on DeviantArt who reject criticism because that's just how the art style looks. I can't change it, guys. Oh, well, we can't help that the art style of the movie looks like this. The watercolor 3D style of Wish is inspired by the watercolor backgrounds of Sleeping Beauty, so it needs to look like this. That's what you sound like when you keep bringing up the medium. I still think the funniest thing I've spotted, though, in terms of these contradictions I keep finding, is the explanation they gave for why they leaned toward making Star a mute character. Because having him be a comic relief sidekick with wish-granting associations, who also talked, made him too much like the genie from Aladdin. Which is fair, I get that. But first off, Wish is meant to celebrate and reference all of Disney's past work. What's wrong with him resembling the genie a little bit? And secondly, it's funny that you changed Star's character around because you didn't want him to resemble another Disney character. You know, especially since Asha's 7 friends in the movie exist to be a reference to the 7 dwarves. Their section of the art book starts with that, make it make sense. You might ask why I'm latching on to little contradictions and things that don't make sense like this. Why am I picking it apart so much instead of taking everything they're saying at face value? To that I say, NDAs are a thing, guys. They could just be contractually obligated to not throw shade at the final product. I fully believe Disney has the crew of Wish by the neck trying to keep them from casting the old version of the movie in a better light than the final one. Because, you know, they want to hype up the actual film, which would especially make sense because this is their 100-year milestone film. They cannot afford to let people know that the final product isn't the best that it could be. But who knows, maybe the NDAs will expire and it'll still turn out that Julia Michaels was telling the truth. But another reason why I feel like I can't believe that is because of something else from the art book. When talking about the set design of the movie, on page 43 of The Art of Wish, a quote from Lisa Keene, one of the concept artists who worked on the movie, goes into detail about the original draft of Wish in relation to the Hamlet, a location that's still used in the final film. It's the little forested part of Rosas where Asha lives, right outside the main city. According to Lisa Keene, quote, "There was a story change in production after we designed the Hamlet. It used to be a hidden refuge. Asha and her community were hiding in the forest far away from Magnifico so he couldn't find them and steal their wishes." And then David Womersley, a production designer on the film, goes into more detail about this earlier version of the story, stating that, quote, "In this version of the story, Asha's community built the village from scratch after fleeing the city of Rosas and lived off what they could find in the forest, making pine cone flour bread and cultivating various dairy products." I bring this up because it gives us an insight into what the original draft of the film was like, and how, logically speaking, Asha would have been raised in the Hamlet, away from the main city of Rosas. She would be raised knowing why they live away from the main city of Rosas, is what I'm saying. Which means there's no logical way in the story for her and Magnifico, the man she and her family are hiding from, the man that she would know they are hiding from because he would steal their wishes if he finds them, would share a duet with him about the wishes. It makes less sense than in the final film, where he's like, "Hey, girl I've only known for one day, take a look at my wishes, even though you obviously failed the job interview." In this version of the story, it would have been more like, "Ah, yes, girl who lives away from my city because you do not agree with the way I run things, come look at my wishes and sing about how wonderful they are with me." Like, no. And for a moment, I stopped to consider, well, maybe there's a viable story reason for it in this draft. Maybe either, 1, Asha's community only recently went to hide in the forest from Magnifico, and her discovering the wishes and therefore having the duet with him was the catalyst. Or 2, Asha had a rebellious Disney girl moment and went to be Magnifico's apprentice, had the duet, then when she tried to flee back to the forest, she accidentally exposed her community's hiding place to Magnifico, and that's how the plot gets kickstarted. But no, I can't even reason something like that. Because in the same deleted scene that they cut because they were confused about why Magnifico wanted power, it is revealed that in this version of the story, Amaya is the one to figure out where the Hamlet is. And it's not because of Asha, it's because she notices this one young man who rides into Rosas, then goes into the uncharted forest, and every time he returns, he has a lighter load. Her reasoning is that he's getting resources in Rosas and smuggling them to the Hamlet for all the people who ran away from Magnifico's rule. So my one theory as to how this duet could possibly ever work in the old draft of the film doesn't work. Because not only do we have confirmation as to how long her community has been hiding, which is long enough that Magnifico and Amaya have been struggling to find them for quite some time.
How would you like the wishes of an entire Hamlet?
You found the traitors? So wicked. He's taking supplies to the last hidden hamlet.
But we also have confirmation about how Magnifico and Amaya find the Hamlet, and it isn't through Asha. So, to conclude this mini video essay, were Star and Asha ever meant to be love interests? Probably not. There's no explicit statements, and the one song that everyone cites as evidence of this scrapped romance was said by the lyricist herself to have always been about Asha and Magnifico. However, due to deleted scenes hinting at something more between Asha and Star, segments in the art book giving insight to the old draft of the story that contradict the idea of a duet between Asha and Magnifico always being the case, as well as already finding multiple other contradictions when it comes to the creative decisions made in the final product, in an attempt to paint the finalized film as the superior version of the story. I think there's still a chance that once those NDAs expire, someone might come out of the woodwork to say that people were right on the money. Or not. We'll see in like a year or two. But yeah, thanks for enjoying my unnecessarily complex deep dive into why I think people might be onto something with the Star X Asha stuff, despite there being evidence of the contrary. Sorry that my argument boiled down to just going, oh, you're saying this one song that's very blatantly written to be a love song was always contextually meant to be sung by the protagonist and the vain villain? Neat. I don't believe you. No one else in this production can keep their damn stories straight, therefore I don't think you did either. Stay tuned for the rest of my wish-induced ramblings. Here, have a preview of what's to come.
Ah! Hi! Hi again.
Don't ask when it's coming out. I have no idea. I have a thesis film to work on, and this video essay's been occupying my brain for free, and I really should charge it rent. Okay, bye.
So I look up at the stars.